always fun to talk golf with the Action Network's Jason Sobel. I'm Adam Kaufman, but it's even more fun, Jason, when we get to talk majors. Now, this isn't a major, but it's almost a major. It's golf's fifth major, if you will, and that is the Players' Championship, and you are there at TPC Sawgrass. Normally, I don't like to start a conversation with anybody with, how's the weather? But it seems like that could be a concern this week. What do you think?
Yeah, so Adam, first things first, I am at the Players' Championship this week. It's not a major championship, but it's a championship that if we're using a descriptive adjective, we can call it major. So I think that's a good way of parsing this out. As far as the weather, yes, let's talk about the weather. Let's make some small talk, Adam. We're going to get a little bit of everything, which I love. The fact that TPC Sawgrass is a course which tests all aspects of a player's game, and the conditions are going to test all aspects of a player's game this week. It's going to start out warm, wet, rainy for the first 2 days, but pretty calm conditions otherwise. Then Saturday, all of a sudden, it's going to start blowing. We're going to have wind gusts of up to 35, maybe even 40 miles an hour on Saturday. And then Sunday, it gets really cool. It's going to be about 50, 52 degrees, and the wind's not going to be as tough, but it's going to be cooler conditions. It's crazy. It's like we're getting all four seasons in 4 days this week.
So I know you're not technically a meteorologist, although you could have fooled me right there. I guess you play one on DKTV, and that's fine. But let's go to something that I know you know all about, and that, of course, is odds on the DraftKings Sportsbook. And the players right now, the favorites, you got the world's number one in Jon Rahm, and you also have Justin Thomas. They are co-favorites on the DK Sportsbook going into this thing at plus 1,000. I guess my question for you is, though, are you going to bet either of these guys?
I'm not going to bet either one of those guys at those numbers. But again, like we so often say about the favorites at any event, especially a big event where these guys are gearing up for it, if you like them, I'm not going to talk you out of them. And Jon Rahm certainly is a guy with a very high ceiling and a very high floor. I don't expect him to play poorly this week, but what we've seen from Rahm over his last couple of starts is sort of his B- game. Now, his B- game is good enough to get him into contention. It's good enough to be somewhere on the leaderboard this weekend, but I think he's got to step it up and at least have his A- game to be able to win this golf tournament. Justin Thomas won this event last year. Ever since, he's been knocking on the door for another title, and it hasn't quite come yet. Wouldn't surprise me to see JT become the first back-to-back winner in tournament history, but there's a reason why it hasn't happened before. It's really hard to do. And so for that reason, I'm staying away from JT, at least in the outright markets this week.
It's not like Rory McIlroy is this, old dog, old horse put out to pasture or whatever, but it's certainly been a while since we've been talking about this guy on a weekly basis, but he's been hot of late. You know, he won this event, obviously 3 years ago, 2019, but more recently, top 20 finishes his last 9 times out. So what are the expectations that he sort of turns back the clock a little bit, keeps the momentum going, and is a real contender to win this thing at plus 1,600?
Yeah, so coming off a week at the Arnold Palmer Invitational where he was first round leader following a 65, then in obviously much tougher conditions, shot 76-76 in the weekend rounds and wasn't in contention by the end of it. And so I think we look at Rory and say, yes, he is playing very well. This is a stretch of really good golf for him right now. And yet there's still those lingering questions where we say, can he close it out on the weekend? I mean, I don't know what's quite wrong with his game on the weekends right now. I do think that at some point he's going to close. He's going to win something big fairly soon. It might not be for another month. It might be that first real major of the year in Augusta. We'll get to that in a few weeks. But this week, I like him. He's won here, of course, back in 2019. He can go out there on soft, wet conditions over the first 2 rounds. I think it's perfect Rory McIlroy weather. I could see very much the same scenario that we saw last week, which is, hey, you can fire at flag sticks. It's nice and soft. Go out there, post a couple of good scores. And then on the weekend, it gets colder, it gets windier, it gets tougher, and maybe the same results for Rory on the weekend that we saw last week as well.
Speaking of momentum, you have Viktor Hovland. Now, he was tied for second at the API, T4 at the Genesis. He's plus 2,000 coming into this thing. What do you think? Can he keep it up?
So really, we look at the top players in the game. And I keep mentioning that TPC Sawgrass, Adam, tests all aspects of a player's performance. And most of the guys that we've talked about so far, Jon Rahm, Rory McIlroy, Justin Thomas, they do everything well. That's why they're among the best players in the world. Victor Hovland is among the best players in the world, and yet has a glaring weakness in his game. That short game, especially wedges around the green and his bunker play, has really been, let's face it, pretty terrible so far this year. And so even though he's coming off a title contention, even though he's played really, really well, despite having this glaring weakness, it's just hard for me to jump on Victor Hovland right now until he shores up that part of his game. And so, look, I don't feel right about completely fading Hovland, but I just can't get behind him knowing that at least one aspect of his game is not suited for this course or really for any major championship setting just yet. I think he'll get there. I think he's going to work on it and he's going to improve. But right now, boy, he better hit a whole lot of greens in regulation because around the greens, it's just not very good right now.
Who do you feel okay about fading this week?
There aren't a whole lot of guys to fade. I'm going to give you a name that this is not exactly going out on a limb, but Webb Simpson, who won here just a few years ago, 2018, coming off an injury, hasn't played in about a month and a half, I believe. And so you look at Webb Simpson, probably not a whole lot of people jumping on Webb this week anyway, but just in case for the casual bettors out there who haven't really gotten into golf until we get to a big event like this and they see a big number next to Webb Simpson's name and say, well, he's won before. He's really good. Why don't I take him? Well, there is a little red flag next to him in the fact that he hasn't played much lately. So again, the diehards know this, the usual bettors know this, but if you're a casual bettor and you're just jumping into golf now, you might not understand that Webb Simpson hasn't played much lately. So I would stay away at least for a little bit.
We keep talking, Jason, about all these guys way up the odds boards, favorites, past winners, that type of thing. What about the guys down low on the odds boards, long shots that you might actually like to win this?
Yeah. How long do you want your long shots this week? I mean, I can start with guys who really aren't I don't consider them long shots. Guys like Daniel Berger and Sungjae Im, Matt Fitzpatrick, Sam Burns. I really like all of those guys. Not exactly sleepers, though. If you want to dig way deeper, players who have played well here in the past, a Brian Harman with 3 top 8 finishes in his last 6 starts at TPC Sawgrass. Francesco Molinari has played well here in the past. I think you look at players like that. Emiliano Grillo interests me a little bit. Chris Kirk coming off a nice week last week. So there certainly are players that I don't know that they necessarily have the win equity in this type of field where we've got so many good players playing so well right now. I think it's going to be one of the big names, but I look at those guys for top 10, top 20 equity and value, and I think you can play those guys and be pretty confident that a few of them will pay off.
All right, Jason, shake off everything that we've talked about so far and peer into your crystal ball. That's what I like to see. And tell me, give me the one name, who's going to win the Players' Championship?
Well, this guy should have a little chip on his shoulder right now because, Adam, we've been talking for about 5 minutes. You've asked me about Jon Rahm. You've asked me about Justin Thomas. You've asked me about Rory McIlroy. You've asked me about Victor Hovland. You have not asked me about the number 2 ranked player in the world who might be the best all-around player in the game right now. In fact, he leads the PGA Tour's all-around category, leads in total strokes gained this season. Collin Morikawa is at least making a case as the number 1 best player on the planet right now. He, in fact, can get to number 1 in the world if he wins this week. And I love the fact that he's a guy that keeps it in the fairway. I believe 15th in driving accuracy this season. He's a tremendous ball striker, perhaps the best in the world, or at least in that top 2 or 3 alongside Justin Thomas. And so I look at Collin Morikawa this week. He's got everything that you need to do right, which is essentially every part of your game. Like I say, TPC Sawgrass, the weather, everything about this week, you're going to have to do everything in your game really, really well. And Collin Morikawa, I think he's the most well-rounded player in golf today. That's why I like him to win.
Well, Morikawa maybe number 2, but he and you're at the number 1 place to be for golf fans this week. TPC Sawgrass, Jason Sobel, Action Network. Thank you so much, sir. We'll talk to you again next week.
All right. Thanks, Adam.